Have you ever found yourself staring at a task you know you need to do, only to find yourself scrolling through social media, making a snack, or doing anything but starting? That nagging feeling of delay, the endless cycle of "I will do it later," is not laziness. It is your brain sending a warning signal, telling you to stay safe. Deep inside your mind, there is a small but powerful structure called the amygdala. This tiny part of your brain has been protecting humans for millions of years, detecting threats and keeping us alive. The problem is, it does not know the difference between a real danger, like a predator, and a modern challenge, like finishing a project, having a tough conversation, or preparing for an important presentation. To your amygdala, both feel like life or death situations. This fear-based response triggers a chain reaction. Your rational mind, the part that should help you tackle tasks, starts creating convincing excuses. Suddenly, everything seems like a reason to wait. You need more time, more research, the right inspiration, or the perfect environment. These are not signs of weakness. They are signals that your brain is trying to protect you from discomfort and uncertainty. But here's the exciting part. Once you understand how this system works, you can learn to override it. You can train your mind to act despite fear, to turn hesitation into momentum, and to transform procrastination into productivity. In this video, I am going to walk you step by step through the science and strategies that can help you conquer procrastination once and for all. If you are ready to take control of your time, your focus, and your life, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Every tip I share is designed to help you take immediate action and see real results. So do not miss out. Let us dive in and uncover how your brain really works and how you can finally start getting things done. As we continue to explore why procrastination holds such a strong grip on our lives, it is important to understand not only the fear that the amygdala produces, but also the invisible currents of motivation that flow through our brains, quietly dictating whether we act or retreat. Deep within your neural circuits lies a chemical called dopamine, often misunderstood as simply the pleasure molecule. But in reality, it functions more like the engine that drives all purposeful action. Imagine dopamine as a river with two distinct currents, one fast and erratic, one steady and enduring. The fast current, known as phasic dopamine, surges in sharp, sudden bursts that pull your attention toward immediate rewards. The bright, flashy distractions that the modern world is overflowing with. It is the reason you can find yourself endlessly scrolling through videos or refreshing social media feeds, each click delivering a hit of that quick, exhilarating rush. It feels satisfying, almost irresistible, because your brain interprets these bursts as urgent signals to engage, even though they are completely unrelated to your long-term goals. Meanwhile, the slower, steadier flow, tonic dopamine, is responsible for the sustained focus that allows someone to read a book from cover to cover, to sit through hours of work without losing momentum, or to persist on a project that offers no immediate gratification but immense future reward. This current keeps you anchored to purpose, giving structure and continuity to your efforts. And it is what separates consistent achievers from those who drift endlessly from task to task. Yet chronic procrastinators often find that the fast, impulsive current of phasic dopamine repeatedly hijacks the tonic current. The moment a challenge arises, whether it is a looming deadline, a difficult conversation, or a creative task that requires deep concentration, the brain's attention is subtly diverted toward the brighter, easier, and instantly gratifying alternative. In that split second, what should have been a steady push forward becomes a sudden drift toward avoidance, and the pattern repeats itself day after day, forming habits that feel almost impossible to break. The interplay between these two systems explains a paradox we all recognize but seldom understand. Why you can spend hours binge-watching a series or playing games without stopping, yet struggle to dedicate a single uninterrupted hour to something meaningful. It is not a matter of discipline or character flaw. It is the way your brain's reward systems have been hijacked by constant stimuli optimized for immediate engagement. Each time you give in to these impulses, the neural pathways that prioritize short-term pleasure are strengthened, while those that maintain focus and perseverance weaken, making future concentration even more difficult. Yet awareness of this dynamic offers the first glimpse of liberation. By learning to recognize when phasic dopamine is pulling you off course, by deliberately structuring your environment and your habits to favor the slow, sustained current, and by strategically rewarding yourself only after completing meaningful tasks, it becomes possible to reclaim control over your own attention. The very chemical that can enslave you to distraction can, with understanding and intentional action, be harnessed to fuel persistent, focused progress, turning what once felt like an endless battle against procrastination into a manageable, even predictable, path of accomplishment. By now, you have come to understand how the amygdala can hijack your mind with fear, and how dopamine can either propel you forward or drag you into a cycle of distraction. Yet there is another layer to unravel if you truly want to break free from procrastination: the power of naming and externalizing your fears. Imagine sitting at your desk, staring at a daunting project that seems too big to even begin, your heart racing, thoughts spinning, and every fiber of your being pulling you toward avoidance. In that moment, your mind is a battlefield where the primitive signals of the amygdala wage war against your rational, goal-oriented intentions, and it feels as though no amount of willpower could possibly prevail. The trick is not to fight the fear directly, because fear, by its very nature, thrives on invisibility and ambiguity. Instead, you can bring it into the light by writing it down. When you put pen to paper and articulate the specific fears that have been quietly sabotaging your actions, whether it is fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of revealing your own perceived inadequacies, or fear of taking a misstep, you transform them from abstract shadows into tangible entities you can confront. Suddenly, what once felt like an overwhelming, amorphous weight becomes a set of defined challenges, each of which your rational mind can assess, understand, and dismantle. This process works because it engages a different region of the brain, connecting your motor system to your limbic system, bridging emotion with logic. The very act of writing turns the intangible into the concrete and allows the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, planning, and foresight, to step in as a mediator rather than a passive observer. You begin to see patterns, that your fear of starting is not a sign of weakness, that the imagined catastrophe is rarely as catastrophic as your mind predicts, and that every what-if can be addressed with a deliberate step rather than endless rumination. By externalizing these fears, you remove their silent, looming power and reclaim agency over your decisions, gradually replacing paralyzing dread with calculated courage. Consider the story of a young writer who had been postponing her first novel for years. Each morning she would tell herself she was not ready, her ideas were not good enough, and the world would judge her harshly. One day, she decided to write down every fear she could identify. By the time she finished, her fears were no longer nebulous monsters lurking in her mind, they were notes on a page. Manageable and specific, with that clarity, she devised concrete steps to address each concern, outlining the story before writing, setting daily word goals, and accepting that early drafts would be imperfect. The act of writing had changed the conversation inside her head. The paralysis that had dominated her mornings was replaced by forward motion. This is the magic of externalization. It not only diminishes fear but also converts it into fuel for action. When fear is named and seen, it loses the capacity to dictate your behavior. It becomes a puzzle to solve rather than a tyrant to obey. And in this transformation, procrastination begins to loosen its grip. By integrating this practice into your daily routine, You create a mental environment where focus can flourish, motivation is reinforced, and the runaway impulses of phasic dopamine no longer have free rein. The simple, almost meditative act of writing down your fears bridges the gap between emotion and reason, turning avoidance into accountability, dread into clarity, and hesitation into deliberate movement toward the life and achievements you truly desire. As you begin to understand the intricate dance between fear and motivation, the next step toward breaking free from procrastination is learning to shift the very lens through which your brain perceives risk. Up until your amygdala has been in charge, sounding alarms at the mere thought of discomfort or uncertainty, while phasic dopamine has continuously pulled your attention toward immediate rewards that promise momentary relief from tension. But there is a powerful tool that can override these instinctive responses: the visualization of long-term consequences. Imagine, for a moment, that you continue to delay a critical task, the one that could change your career, improve your health, or deepen a relationship. Today, you set it aside. Tomorrow, the same hesitation repeats. Months pass, and the opportunities that were once vivid and tangible begin to fade, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret. Your mind, previously dominated by fear of immediate discomfort, suddenly has to contend with the profound weight of what has been lost: the doors never opened, the skills never developed, the potential never realized. This exercise in mental projection is not meant to paralyze you with guilt, but to recalibrate your internal risk assessment. When you bring the future into the present, the brain starts to recognize that inaction carries a far greater cost than action ever could. The same amygdala that once screamed for avoidance now begins to process the subtle signals of missed opportunity, the quiet but persistent pain of regret, which is far more difficult to ignore than the temporary discomfort of starting. By holding this future scenario vividly in your mind, you create a new emotional benchmark. The agony of inaction becomes palpable, tangible, and immediate, while taking imperfect action, once feared for its potential flaws, now appears far less threatening. Consider the story of a young entrepreneur named Alex, who had been postponing the launch of his first product for years. Each time he sat at his desk, doubts flooded in. The design was not perfect. The market was not ready. He was not experienced enough. Then one evening, he took a step rarely encouraged in productivity advice. He closed his eyes and imagined where he would be if he continued to delay. He pictured himself 3 years later, watching competitors succeed, feeling the sting of regret for a project that could have been his breakthrough. The vision was uncomfortable, almost painful, yet it sparked a shift. When he returned to his desk, the same fears lingered, but now they were dwarfed by a far more compelling force: the desire to avoid that future version of himself, the one trapped in inaction. Alex began to work, not because he had conquered fear entirely, but because inaction had become more frightening than imperfection. The first imperfect step was taken. Momentum built, and eventually, the product launched successfully. This principle works because it aligns with the brain's natural pattern-seeking tendencies. Humans are wired to avoid pain, but our nervous system is more sensitive to immediate threats than abstract future consequences. By visualizing the long-term effects of delay, you trick your mind into bringing distant consequences into present focus, creating an urgency that competes with the short-term allure of distraction. It transforms procrastination from a seemingly safe escape into a source of immediate discomfort, making action the path of least resistance. In this way, the fear that once immobilized you can be redirected, not toward avoidance, but toward deliberate, imperfect steps forward. And the act of taking action, however flawed, becomes a powerful antidote to the silent tyranny of hesitation. By now, you have seen how fear can hijack your mind, how dopamine can pull your focus in conflicting directions, and how visualizing the long-term consequences of inaction can transform hesitation into urgency. Yet knowing these principles is only part of the battle. The next step is translating insight into concrete action, creating a framework that turns awareness into habit. This is where practical strategies become your most powerful allies, allowing you to navigate the invisible currents of motivation and fear with precision and control. One of the most effective techniques begins with breaking tasks into small, digestible steps. A daunting project that stretches across weeks or months can feel paralyzing when viewed as a single monolith. But when divided into manageable pieces, it becomes a series of achievable actions. Each small step completed generates a sense of progress, triggering tonic dopamine and reinforcing your brain's ability to sustain focus, while simultaneously undermining the basic impulses that previously lured you into distraction. Equally important is the environment in which you operate. Procrastination is often less about internal weakness and more about external interference. A cluttered desk, constant notifications, or even a noisy room can activate the same avoidance circuits in the amygdala that we have discussed, pulling attention away from meaningful work. By designing a space that minimizes distractions and maximizes ease of action, placing necessary tools within reach. Silencing phones, using website blockers, or clearing visual clutter, you create a setting that encourages movement rather than resistance. Your surroundings can either be allies or silent saboteurs. Shaping them intentionally gives the rational, goal-oriented part of your brain a fighting chance to dominate over fear and impulsive urges. Timing also plays a crucial role. Every individual has energy peaks throughout the day, periods when focus and cognitive clarity are naturally higher. Scheduling the most important, challenging tasks during these windows leverages the body's own rhythms to your advantage, turning what once felt insurmountable into tasks that feel easier to tackle. Coupled with this is the use of commitment devices, making a promise to yourself, publicly or privately, to follow through on a task can transform intention into obligation. Writing the commitment down, setting deadlines, or enlisting accountability partners adds weight to your actions, creating psychological structures that reduce the likelihood of deferring critical work. Finally, the 2-minute rule offers a simple yet revolutionary tactic against perfectionism. Starting is often the greatest hurdle, and by committing to just 2 minutes of imperfect action, you bypass the paralysis caused by the desire for perfection. These 2 minutes are rarely wasted. They create momentum, diminish fear, and often expand naturally into longer periods of focused work. When combined, these strategies breaking tasks down, optimizing environment, timing actions to energy cycles, creating commitments, and initiating through the 2-minute rule form a cohesive system that directly addresses both the neurological and psychological roots of procrastination. The process transforms overwhelming tasks into a series of approachable actions, fear into calculated awareness, and hesitation into tangible progress. Over time, these practices do more than just help you complete work. They reshape the way your mind responds to challenges, gradually rewiring your internal reward systems so that action becomes habitual, effortless, and even intrinsically satisfying, dissolving procrastination from a recurring struggle into a distant memory. Ultimately, all the strategies, insights, and exercises we have explored, from understanding the fear-driven signals of the amygdala, to harnessing dopamine, to visualizing the long-term consequences of inaction, to structuring your tasks and environment, lead to one profound truth. Procrastination is not just a habit, it is a reflection of identity. When you see yourself as someone who hesitates, who waits for perfect conditions, or who avoids discomfort, your actions will naturally align with that identity. But the moment you decide that you are a person who takes action, who faces fear head-on, and who values progress over perfection, everything changes. Identity becomes the compass that guides your behavior, and every choice to act, no matter how small, strengthens that internal narrative. Imagine the mindset of a warrior. Disciplined, resilient, and focused, yet adaptable and strategic. Warriors do not wait for motivation to strike. They move because action defines them. Similarly, when you adopt this mindset in your own life, each completed task, each small victory, and each courageous step in the face of fear reinforces your sense of self as someone who delivers. The resistance that once paralyzed you, the endless mental loops, the rationalizations, the distractions begins to lose power because they no longer align with the person you have decided to be. You are no longer negotiating with procrastination. You are leading from a position of strength. Over time, this identity-driven approach creates a powerful feedback loop. Action builds confidence. Confidence builds consistency, and consistency reinforces identity. Fear no longer dominates your decisions because your rational brain and your carefully structured strategies are now supported by a deep, internalized belief. You act, therefore you are capable, disciplined, and persistent. Tasks that once seemed overwhelming or anxiety-inducing become opportunities to demonstrate the person you have committed to becoming, rather than obstacles that trigger avoidance. As you move forward, remember that the fight against procrastination is ultimately a fight for identity. It is about choosing to see yourself not as someone who delays, doubts, or waits, but as someone who takes action, completes tasks, and honors commitments even when circumstances are imperfect, even when fear whispers, even when motivation falters. Every step you take, no matter how small, is a declaration of that identity and a building block of long-term transformation. Thank you so much for watching and investing your time in this journey. If you found this video valuable, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content that helps you master focus, productivity, and personal growth. Remember, the key to defeating procrastination is not a trick or a fleeting burst of motivation. It is who you choose to be. Embrace the warrior within, take that next action, and watch as procrastination becomes a distant memory while your potential unfolds before you.